The pelagornithids were a group of large seabirds that were found around the world for almost the entire Cenozoic, existing for at least 60 million years and only going completely extinct just 2.5 million years ago. Their evolutionary relationships are uncertain, and in the past they've been considered as relatives of albatrosses or storks, but more recently they've been proposed to have been closer related to ducks and geese instead. Whatever they were some of the largest birds to ever fly, and many of the smaller species still had wingspans comparable to the largest modern flying birds. Their most notable feature was their beaks. Although at first glance they looked like they were lined with pointy teeth, these structures were actually outgrowths of their jaw bones covered with keratinous beak tissue. While these bony spikes would have been useful for holding onto slippery aquatic animals like fish and squid, they were actually hollow and relatively fragile, so pelagornithids must have mainly caught smaller prey that couldn't thrash around hard enough to break anything. Pelagornis was highly adapted for albatross-like dynamic soaring, with long narrow wings that allowed it to travel huge distances while expending very little energy, but with its proportionally short legs it would have been clumsy on the ground and probably spent the vast majority of its life on the wing, only returning to land to breed. The discovery of Vegetation demonstrates that the major groups of bird alive today had already diversified in the Cretaceous. This supports the long-standing phylogenetic inferences of paleornithologists. It has been hailed as the first definitive physical proof that representatives of some of the groups of modern birds lived in the Mesozoic. It was a bird with high metabolism, which allowed it to live at high latitudes in Antarctica. It also shows a degree of osteosclerosis. Gastornis species were very large birds, and have traditionally been considered to be predators of small mammals. However, several lines of evidence, including the lack of hooked claws in known Gastornis footprints and studies of their beak structure and isotopic signatures of their bones, have caused scientists to reinterpret these birds as herbivores that probably fed on tough plant material and seeds. The legs were well developed with a stride that could cover a lot of ground, allowing Gastornis to reach quite fast speeds. The wings by contrast were so underdeveloped that they were what is known as vestigial, present, but serving no practical physical purpose. Brontornis might not actually have been a terror bird at all. The known fossil material is fragmentary enough that it's still hard to tell for certain, but there's some evidence that links it to the Gastornithiformes, a group of huge herbivorous birds related to modern waterfowl. It represents a previously completely unknown lineage of South American giant flightless Galloanserines. And it would represent a third time that group of birds convergently evolved this sort of body plan and ecological role on entirely different continents during the Cenozoic. Like its relatives, the actual diet of Dromornis remains a subject of debate amongst paleontologists. Its actual skull is only known from fragmentary remains, so it is hard to infer diet based upon its description. Body features such as the lack of sharp claws have been taken as signs that it may have been a herbivore, reaching up into trees to crop vegetation with its beak. However, more complete skulls belonging to other members of the groups such as Genyornis suggest that the Dromornithids would have been equally capable of killing and eating meat. Another suggestion for Dromornis, which can also be applied to others of the group, is that they were omnivores, typically feeding from plants, but also supplementing their diet with meat by either hunting small animals or scavenging carrion. Aboriginal rock art dated to around just 40,000 years ago depicts birds that are strikingly similar to Genyornis, strongly suggesting that the Aboriginal people did indeed live alongside this bird. In fact, Genyornis bones have even been found associated with human artifacts, indicating the possibility that the early human settlers may have hunted Genyornis. This also lends some support to the theory that much of the Australian megafauna went extinct as a result of hunting and land settlement by early humans. Like many modern waterfowl, the Willaroo species had spurs and knobs on their carpals. Like the closely related modern-day screamers, these were almost certainly used to fight, indicating perhaps territorial habits, as opposed to the more gregarious nature of earlier presbyornithids. They coexisted with several Anatid and Anseranatid species, indicating that there was little ecological competition. It is possible that a speciation towards terrestriality might have spared it from competition with more derived waterfowl, allowing it to live longer than other presbyornithids. The presbyornithids were an early group of waterfowl birds that first appeared in the late Cretaceous, about 71 million years ago. With their long necks, long legs and duck-like bills adapted for filter feeding, they seem to have essentially been primitive ducks converging on the body shape and lifestyle of flamingos. They lived in shallow freshwater environments all around the world, and after surviving through the end Cretaceous extinction they even became some of the most common waterbirds in the early Cenozoic. Some species have been found in large bone beds containing fossils from thousands of individuals all in one place, suggesting they were very social and lived in huge flocks. Presbyornis was one of the first Anseriformes. Because of its long legs and neck, it was initially mistaken for a flamingo, but it was reclassified as an Anseriform when the duck-like anatomy of its skull and bill was found. Later, it was believed to represent a transitional stage between the Anseriformes and the shorebirds, but it is now considered a member of an extinct group of Anseriformes which was most closely related to modern screamers. Its broad, flat bill was used to filter food from the water, in the manner of today's dabbling ducks. Temperatures in Antarctica at the time were much warmer than today, and the area where its fossils were found would have been a temperate estuary or river delta. Conflicto was probably an omnivorous wading bird, feeding on vegetation, small fish and invertebrates in shallow freshwater. Its closest known relative might actually be the similarly aged Anatiidae from North America and Europe, suggesting that its lineage was quite widespread and already taking advantage of vacant niches in the immediate wake of the Cretaceous-Paleogene mass extinction. Magpie geese are unmistakable birds with their black and white plumage and yellowish legs. The feet are only partially webbed, and the magpie goose feeds on vegetable matter in the water, as well as on land. Unlike true geese, their molt is gradual, so no flightless periods result. The species was once also widespread in southern Australia but disappeared from there largely due to the drainage of the wetlands where the birds once bred. Due to their importance to Aboriginal people as a seasonal food source, as subjects of recreational hunting, and as a tourist attraction, their expansive and stable presence in northern Australia has been ensured protective management. The turtle-jawed moanalo was a large flightless goose-like duck from the Hawaiian island of Kauai. These birds and their relatives were descended from dabbling ducks and existed on most of the larger Hawaiian islands for the last 3 million years or so, before going extinct around 1,000 years ago following the arrival of Polynesian settlers. It had an unusually shaped bill, tall and broad with vertically oriented nostrils, convergently similar to the beak of a turtle. It would have occupied the same sort of ecological niche as giant tortoises on other islands, filling the role of large herbivore in the absence of mammals. Located almost 3,700 kilometers from the nearest continental shore, Hawaii are the most isolated islands on Earth. Their native species are all descended from the rare colonization events that reached such a remote location, either via ocean rafting or island hopping from much older now submerged islands northwest in the chain. Like many other Pacific islands, no land mammals ever reached Hawaii prior to human arrival, and so it was birds that ended up filling many of the vacant ecological niches. Garganornis is an extraordinarily enormous extinct species of waterfowl from fissure fillings in Gargano of Italy. It would have weighed somewhere between 15 and 22 kilograms. It lived in what were probably very isolated and open habitats in Italy, potentially with few or even no predators. This is thought to have been the major contributor to its large size. In fact, it has a lot of convergent traits with Gastornis, possibly indicating that both groups evolved similarly in order to achieve large size. The Kauai mole duck lived alongside one of the Moanalo species. They don't seem to have been closely related at all. It instead appears to have come from a different duck lineage entirely. It had short chunky legs and an especially weird skull, with eyes so tiny and underdeveloped that it must have been near blind and flightless. But the areas of its brain associated with the sense of touch were proportionally huge, and although the exact shape of its beak currently isn't known, it seems to have been very wide and flat. It was probably a nocturnal bird that used an incredibly sensitive bill to grub around in the undergrowth for invertebrates, sort of an equivalent of the modern kiwi but with a face more like a platypus. Long-tailed ducks undergo a molt migration, where they leave their breeding grounds and move to different areas for molting. During this time, they are flightless and vulnerable. They winter in coastal areas, including bays, estuaries, and open waters. They can be found in both saltwater and freshwater environments during the winter months. They are well adapted to cold environments. They can withstand extremely low temperatures. The pink-headed duck is a large diving duck that was once found in parts of the Gangetic Plains of India and in the riverine swamps of Myanmar but feared extinct since the 50s. Numerous searches have failed to provide any proof of continued existence. It has been suggested that it may exist in the inaccessible swamp regions of northern Myanmar, and some site reports from that region have led to its status being declared as critically endangered rather than extinct. The white-faced whistling duck is gregarious, and at favored sites, the flocks of 1,000 or more birds arriving at dawn are an impressive sight. As the name implies, these are noisy birds with a clear three-note whistling call. It has a peculiar disjunctive distribution, occurring in Africa and South America. It has been suggested that they may have been transported to new locations worldwide by humans. The habitat is still freshwater lakes or reservoirs, with plentiful vegetation, where this duck feeds on seeds and other plant food. The king eider's foraging strategies change depending on the season. For much of the year, it is at sea. There, it dives for benthic invertebrates. During the breeding season, it does more of its foraging on freshwater lakes and ponds, where it dabbles, feeding primarily on small invertebrates plucked from the surface of the water. The oldest known king eider was a female that lived at least 18 years 11 months. The down feathers of eider ducks and some other ducks and geese are used to fill pillows and quilts. They have given the name to the type of quilt known as an eiderdown. The white-headed duck breeding habitat is lakes with open water and dense vegetation at the margin. These birds dive and swim underwater. They are omnivorous, with vegetable matter predominating. They are reluctant to fly, preferring to swim for cover. It is more likely to swim away from a perceived threat than to fly. Populations are declining, mostly due to loss of habitat and pollution, and the International Union for Conservation of Nature has rated the bird's status as endangered. The black-headed duck is partially migratory. It is a year-round resident in most of its range but is found in most of Paraguay and its small Bolivian range only in the non-breeding season. It feeds by diving. Though little information is available about its diet, a major component appears to be seeds and snails. It is unique among waterfowl. It is an obligate brood parasite. The female does not build a nest but lays its eggs in the nests of other birds. At least 18 other species have been reported as hosts. Unlike some cuckoos, neither the chicks nor adults destroy the eggs or kill the chicks of the host. Male mandarin ducks are known for their vibrant and ornate plumage. They have striking multicolored patterns, including orange sails on their back, ornate patterns on their face, and an array of colors that make them one of the most visually appealing ducks. Female, in contrast, have more subdued colors which provides effective camouflage during nesting. While some populations of mandarin ducks are migratory, others are sedentary, depending on their geographic location. The wild populations are generally considered to be of least concern according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature. However, habitat loss and degradation can impact local populations. Harlequin ducks feed by swimming underwater or diving. They also dabble. They eat mollusks, crustaceans, and insects. Harlequins have smooth, densely packed feathers that trap a lot of air within them. This is vital for insulating such small bodies against the chilly waters they play. It also makes them exceptionally buoyant, making them bounce like corks after dives. The eastern North American population is declining and is considered endangered. Possible causes include loss of habitat due to hydroelectric projects and loss of life due to oil spills near coastal areas. The mallard is a dabbling duck that breeds throughout the temperate and subtropical regions of the northern hemisphere, but it has been introduced in many regions of the southern hemisphere. Males have green heads, while the females have mainly brown speckled plumage. They live in wetlands, eat water plants and small animals, and are social animals preferring to congregate in groups or flocks of varying sizes. Unlike many waterfowl, mallards are considered an invasive species in some regions. It is a very adaptable species, being able to live and even thrive in urban areas which may have supported more localized, sensitive species of waterfowl before development. The non-migratory mallard interbreeds with indigenous wild ducks of closely related species through genetic pollution by producing fertile offspring. Complete hybridization of various species of wild duck gene pools could result in the extinction of many indigenous waterfowl. This species is the main ancestor of most breeds of domestic duck, and its naturally evolved wild gene pool has been genetically polluted by the domestic and feral mallard populations. The Campbell teal is a small, flightless, nocturnal species of dabbling duck endemic to the Campbell Island group of New Zealand. The plumage is similar to that of the Auckland teal, dark sepia with the head and back tinged with green iridescence, and a chestnut breast on the male, with the female dark brown all over. Its natural habitat is tussock grassland dominated by POA tussock grass, ferns and megaherbs. They are apparently territorial in the wild, and probably feed on amphipods and insects. Ruddy shelduck mostly inhabits inland water bodies such as lakes, reservoirs and rivers. The male and female form a lasting pair bond and the nest may be well away from water, in a crevice or hole in a cliff, tree or similar site. A clutch of about 8 eggs is laid and is incubated solely by the female for about 4 weeks. The young are cared for by both parents and fledge about 8 weeks after hatching. It is a mainly nocturnal bird. It is omnivorous and feeds on grasses, the young shoots of plants, grain and water plants as well as both aquatic and terrestrial invertebrates. Cape Barren geese ability to drink salt or brackish water allows numbers of geese to remain on offshore islands all year round. They are one of the rarest of the world's geese. They are gregarious outside the breeding season, when they wander more widely, forming small flocks. It is a most peculiar goose of uncertain affiliations. It may either belong in the true geese and swan subfamily Anserinae or in the shelduck subfamily Tadorninae, or be separated, possibly including the prehistorically extinct flightless New Zealand geese of the genus Nemiornis. A previous decline in numbers appears to have been reversed as birds in the east at least have adapted to feeding on agricultural land. The Canada goose is a large wild goose with a black head and neck, white cheeks, white under its chin and a brown body. It is native to the Arctic and temperate regions of North America, and it is occasionally found during migration across the Atlantic in northern Europe. Extremely adept at living in human-altered areas, they have established breeding colonies in urban and cultivated habitats, which provide food and few natural predators. The success of this common park species has led to its often being considered a pest species because of its excrement, its depredation of crops, its noise, its aggressive territorial behavior toward both humans and other animals, and its habit of stalking and begging for food, the latter a result of humans disobeying artificial feeding policies toward wild animals. Anatiidae had a combination of features unlike any of its living close relatives. Its head was proportionally large, and it had a long spoon-shaped bill like a shovel or duck, lined with comb-like structures for filter feeding on plankton. It also had widened hips that would have helped keep it stable floating in rough waters. Its tail was highly mobile and muscular, and its feet resembled those of diving birds like loons. With thickened heavy bones and shortened forearms, it was clearly completely unable to fly, but its reduced wings appear to have been highly specialized rather than just vestigial. Its shoulders were extra flexible while its wrists had a more limited range of motion, allowing it to fold its wings into a distinctive half-raised position similar to modern mute swans. It probably used its wings and tail to perform elaborate busking visual displays, and also to carry and protect its young on its back while out at sea, basically making itself into a living swan boat. Giant swan was enormous, at least a third larger than the biggest living swans, taller than the native elephants, although not nearly as heavy. At such a hefty size it would have been either a very poor and reluctant flyer or functionally flightless. Its legs were better adapted for walking around on land than for swimming, with shorter toes and possibly reduced webbing. It would have been one of the biggest terrestrial herbivores on Sicula Malta, probably mainly a grazer but also capable of reaching much higher vegetation than the elephants or tortoises. Swans are the largest extant members of the waterfowl family Anatiidae and are among the largest flying birds. Swans feed in water and on land. They are almost entirely herbivorous, although they may eat small amounts of aquatic animals. Hooper swans require large areas of water to live in, especially when they are still growing because their body weight cannot be supported by their legs for extended periods. The Hooper swan spends much of its time swimming, straining the water for food, or eating plants that grow on the bottom. The mute swan is native to much of Eurasia, and the far north of Africa. It is an introduced species in North America, home to the largest populations outside of its native range. The name mute derives from it being less vocal than other swan species. Measuring 125 to 160 centimeters in length, this large swan is wholly white in plumage with an orange beak bordered with black. It is recognizable by its pronounced knob atop the beak, which is larger in males. Mute swans can be very aggressive in defense of their nests and are highly protective of their mate and offspring. Most defensive acts from a mute swan begin with a loud hiss and, if this is not sufficient to drive off the predator or intruder, are followed by a physical attack. Like other swans, mute swans are known for their ability to grieve for a lost or dead mate or cygnet. Swans will go through a mourning process, and in the case of the loss of their mate, may either stay where their counterpart lived or fly off to join a flock. Should one of the pair die while there are cygnets present, the remaining parent will take up their partner's duties in raising the clutch. Having split away from Australia at the end of the Cretaceous, New Caledonia's Cenozoic isolation has resulted in the islands acting as a refugium for a number of living fossil lineages. One of the strangest residents of these islands was Sylviornis, a huge flightless bird. Initially mistaken for a ratite, it was later found to be a cousin of the Galliformes. It had a massive skull with a large deep beak, topped with a bony crest, along with reduced wings and stout legs. It was probably a slow-moving herbivore, browsing on plant matter and digging up roots and tubers with its beak and feet. Australian brush turkeys are omnivores. They forage on the forest floor for a variety of food, including fruits, seeds, insects, and small animals. One of its most remarkable behaviors is its nesting strategy. Instead of building a nest, these birds create large, mound-like structures made of leaves, sticks, and soil. The male builds and maintains the mound, and the female lays her eggs inside it. The mound serves as an external incubator. The male regulates the temperature of the mound by adding or removing material. The heat generated by microbial decomposition of the organic matter in the mound helps incubate the eggs. Once the eggs hatch, the chicks are fully independent and receive no parental care. They must fend for themselves from the moment they hatch. Maleefowl are shy, wary, solitary birds that usually fly only to escape danger or reach a tree to roost in. Although very active, they are seldom seen as they freeze if disturbed, relying on their intricately patterned plumage to render them invisible, or else fade silently and rapidly into the undergrowth. They have many tactics to run away from predators. Like its relatives, it is notable for the large nesting mounds constructed by the males and lack of parental care after the chicks hatch. Wattled curassow is found in remote rainforests in the western Amazon basin in South America. Males have black plumage, except for a white chrysum, with curly feathers on the head and red bill ornaments and wattles. It is the most ancient lineage of the southern Crax curassows. The habitat of the wattled curassow is gallery forests and seasonally flooded forests where it feeds in small groups on the ground. The diet is largely fruit, but invertebrates and some small vertebrates are opportunistically taken. The population of this species is declining. It is threatened by loss of habitat, as the rainforest is progressively cleared, and by hunting. The black guan has all black plumage with contrasting bright blue facial skin around a red eye. It inhabits cloud forest in the Talamancan montane forest ecozone. It is thought to be mainly sedentary, but there is some evidence of seasonal elevation changes. It forages singly, in pairs, or in small groups. Its primary diet is fruits. Studies in Costa Rica have identified at least 35 different species eaten. It mostly feeds in trees but will also eat fallen fruit on the ground. The oligoas curassow is known to consume a diet of fruits and nuts. Although not much information is known about this species' interactions and behavior in the wild, the stomach contents of these birds were found to contain fruits specifically from the castello tree. They became extinct in the wild due to deforestation and hunting. With the objective to preserve the species and to increase genetic variability in the population, the original stock had their DNA examined by scientists in order to guide future pairings. Once a captive population has been successfully created, they can start being reintroduced back into the wild. Helmeted guineafowl is a gregarious species, forming flocks outside the breeding season typically of about 25 birds that also roost communally. They are particularly well suited to consuming massive quantities of ticks, which might otherwise spread Lyme disease. These birds are terrestrial, and prone to run rather than fly when alarmed. Like most gallinaceous birds, they have a short-lived, explosive flight and rely on gliding to cover extended distances. They can walk 10 kilometers and more in a day. Their bodies are well suited for running, and they are remarkably successful in maintaining dynamic stability over rough terrain at speed. They make loud, harsh calls when disturbed. They are often domesticated. Feral populations descended from domestic flocks are now widely distributed. Despite their weight, wild turkeys, unlike their domesticated counterparts, are agile, fast flyers. In ideal habitat of open woodland or wooded grasslands, they may fly beneath the canopy top and find perches. Turkey populations can reach large numbers in small areas because of their ability to forage for different types of food. Males are polygamous, mating with as many hens as they can. Male wild turkeys display for females by puffing out their feathers, spreading out their tails and dragging their wings. This behavior is most commonly referred to as strutting. They are known to occasionally forage with deer and squirrels, and may even play with them. By foraging together, each can help the other watch for predators with their different senses, the deer with their improved olfactory sense, the turkey with its superior sight, and squirrels providing an additional set of eyes from the air. The greater sage-grouse is a permanent resident in its breeding grounds but may move short distances to lower elevations during winter. It makes use of a complex lex system in mating and nests on the ground under sagebrush or grass patches. It forages on the ground, mainly eating sagebrush but also other plants and insects. They apparently do not require open water for day-to-day survival if succulent vegetation is available. They use free water if it is available, however. Their distribution is apparently seasonally limited by water in some areas. They do not have a muscular crop and are not able to digest hard seeds like other grouse. The species is in decline across its range due to habitat loss, and has been recognized as threatened or near threatened by several national and international organizations. The western capercaillie is adapted to its original habitats, old coniferous forests with a rich interior structure and dense ground vegetation of Vaccinium species under a light canopy. They mainly feed on Vaccinium species, especially bilberry, find cover in young tree growth and use the open spaces when flying. As habitat specialists, they hardly use any other forest types. They are not elegant flyers due to their body weight and short, rounded wings. While taking off they produce a sudden thundering noise that deters predators. Because of their body size and wingspan, they avoid young and dense forests when flying. At the very beginning of dawn, the tree courting begins on a thick branch of a lookout tree. The cock postures himself with raised and fanned tail feathers, erect neck, beak pointed skywards, wings held out and drooped, and starts his typical aria to impress the females. Though much less impressive than his Asiatic cousins, Congo peafowl male's feathers are nevertheless deep blue with a metallic green and violet tinge. He has bare red neck skin, gray feet, and a black tail with 14 tail feathers. His crown is adorned with vertical white elongated hair-like feathers. It is an omnivore with a diet consisting mainly of fruits and insects. It is threatened by habitat loss caused by mining, shifting cultivation, and logging. Indian peafowl display a marked form of sexual dimorphism. The peacock is brightly colored, with a predominantly blue fan-like crest of spatula-tipped wire-like feathers, and is best known for the long train made up of elongated upper tail covert feathers which bear colorful eye spots. These stiff feathers are raised into a fan and quivered in a display during courtship. Despite the length and size of these covert feathers, peacocks are still capable of flight. Their loud calls make them easy to detect, and in forest areas often indicate the presence of a predator such as a tiger. The function of the peacock's elaborate train has been debated for over a century. Charles Darwin found it a puzzle, hard to explain through ordinary natural selection. Later, Amat Zahavi argued that the train was a handicap, and that males were honestly signaling their fitness in proportion to the splendor of their trains. Despite extensive study, opinions remained divided on the mechanisms involved. The common pheasant is native to Asia. It has been widely introduced elsewhere as a game bird. It is one of the world's most hunted birds. It has been introduced for that purpose to many regions such as Europe and North America, and is also common on game farms where it is commercially bred. Ring-necked pheasants in particular are commonly bred and were introduced to many parts of the world. The game farm stock, though no distinct breeds have been developed yet, can be considered semi-domesticated. While common pheasants are able short-distance flyers, they prefer to run. If startled, however, they can suddenly burst upwards at great speed, with a distinctive whirring wing sound. The red jungle fowl is a tropical bird native of South Asia. It is the species that gave rise to the chicken. Evidence from the molecular level derived from whole genome sequencing revealed that the chicken was domesticated from red jungle fowl about 8,000 years ago, with this domestication event involving multiple maternal origins. Since then, their domestic form has spread around the world where they are kept by humans for their meat and eggs. They are now a major source of food for humans. However, undomesticated red jungle fowl still represent an important source of meat and eggs in their endemic range. Flight in these birds is almost purely confined to reaching their roosting areas at sunset in trees or any other high and relatively safe places free from ground predators, and for escape from immediate danger through the day.